So in previous class we talked about, move you down. Yeah, so we talked about how a client request and how a server respond accordingly in that language, that medium. We call that it's a JSON. Then gave us some idea like when a client, in our case, is a language PHP, if it requests something like in a REST format, so it goes kind of like this way, like where the slash something ID. So at runtime, it will be that location ID will be replaced by one, and when the server gets that request, it prepares response accordingly and set it back to the client. Okay. Then we saw XML JSON. Then we talked about how you can convert that JSON into a Java class, or you can understand it how it looks like. Then we talked about a REST client, how a typical or a high level picture of how thing flows from one end to another end. Then we talked about client, the actual client, the Postman tool. If you haven't downloaded it, download it please. Just a Postman. Latest version is fine because it's not about programming, it's just a tool. So latest will work. So through Postman, we will kind of hit something like this, API user something, and the project, the backend code will entertain that request and accordingly go from these classes to and return back to the client, the response. We will see this accordingly in the code. Right now, we already spent 2 days in the theory part most of the time. So to give you a base, what we're up to. Today onwards, we are going to create a class. Sorry, projects. Class, and obviously. Then we also talked about HTTP verbs, and there we also saw which request types are safe, which are not, and there is a term idempotent. We also saw that, and we also understood when we are talking about CRUD operations, so what kind of request or what kind of HTTP verbs uh, work accordingly for CRUD operations. So C for create insert, it's for post, read for data getting, and it's a get request, update is put, delete is delete. Okay, this was about HTTP verbs. And then finally, we also understood how to create a Spring Boot application. So there are like three ways. You can either create a Spring Boot application by using command line, which is not a best idea in our case. And obviously, in day-to-day programming, nobody creates Spring Boot from the scratch. Hardly like 10% developers get this chance. 90% will work in already created project. They just have to import the project. By the way, yeah, but you should know always these types. So CLI is one part, then STS, a dedicated IDE, stands for Spring Tool Suite. It's just a modified version of Eclipse, just for Spring Boot application. That's how Spring Boot is famous. They just created a whole IDE just for a framework. And finally, the website, the official website, start.spring.io. So it gives the same UI like we get in our Eclipse. Um, I'm talking about this right section. Apart from it, you have to select Maven from the project, then Java as your programming language, then the version. When I uh, took this screenshot, it was 2.5 version, you guys can see. But when we created the project, it became, so it was Spring Boot 2 at that time. Now it is 3.3.8. So that's the Spring Boot version we used here. So Maven tool, Java language, Spring Boot 3.3.8, and this is something we entered in our project details, packaging jar and JDK version 17. And we just added one library, Spring Web, which is critical to run any REST API. Okay, so we did so far this much so far. Okay, you asked me Bean, so let's talk about Bean first. So Bean, Bean actually is just a Java class. So when we were doing core Java, I introduced one term. We call this Pojo class. What does it do? It says I will have private fields and public getters and setters. This is a typical Pojo class, plain old Java object. Okay. After that, when we progressed, we also learned one framework, Hibernate. There was one term, entity, in this framework, entity. What does it do? It's same as Pojo class. Same as Pojo class. The difference was with added functionality. What was that functionality? This class can interact with DAO layer. And to make it entity class, what we did? We used annotation at entity. So the role was to contact or have a excuse me. So the role was for this entity class is to have a connection between repository layer or database layer. We will talk about that in more detail. I just mentioned repository. We already used this term in previous class. So in Hibernate, it was all about when the class is going to interact with database. So the class is known as entity in Hibernate framework. Now we are talking about Spring. Again, I'm not saying Spring Boot. It's Spring framework. Okay, I'm writing it specifically Stream framework. Okay, so like we have Hibernate, now we have one more framework, one big framework, Spring framework, and lots of modules are there. Okay, I think I haven't shown that yet. Let me show you guys the Spring framework modules. Let me show you the image. Yeah, this image is good. I'm opening the official document again. No need to refer any website for this. These are the actually Spring framework modules. So that's why that we call this mother of all frameworks. You can find out everything. Everything is here already. Oh, why it's not saved? Okay. Uh, yes. Okay, so what we have here, we have multiple sections in these modules. So if you see from left top, we have data access integration. So all the database related modules are here. JDBC, ORM, yes, the same ORM we done it separately, but now it's a part of Spring Framework. Okay, there's a typo. Ignore it. Then OXM, JMS, and transactions. So all these are modules for data related thing. Either you are fetching data or in storing it somewhere. Web. When it comes to web, so Framework provides multiple modules: WebSocket, Servlet, we did that Servlet, then Web and Portlet. In this section, we also include Spring MVC to create web applications. Then apart from these big things, we have other sections like AOP, Aspect Oriented Programming. So it's a different section, one of the toughest section I would say, one of the toughest thing in Spring Framework to learn. But yeah, it is used. I have used only one time in one of the project, but yes, sometimes it is used, sometimes, well, most time it's not used. It depends upon the requirement. Then aspects, instrumentation, sorry, instrumentation is all about triggering or changing something at runtime. If you want to change some class behavior at runtime, so instrumentation can be used. Then messaging, like we have multiple things like JMS. So messaging also one section here. Then the core, again, these are not the only modules, it's just mostly or commonly used modules in Spring Framework. Then beans, here comes the term beans. Then core, the Spring core, then context and SP, special expression language, to render the UI changes. And the test cases. If you have to write any test case for your Spring Framework, we have a dedicated modules in Spring Framework. So you can see multiple things are there. So one of the module is, or one of the part of this module is beans class. So bean is again nothing but just a special Pojo class, same as Pojo class. Then what's the difference then? With what? Again some added functionality or feature. This class will be managed by Spring. Oh my god, what I'm typing, Spring container. Okay, so the class which is going to be managed by Spring container are known as Spring Bean class. We are talking about Bean class. So we have one more annotation, like we have entity for entities. Here we have at Bean. So That means this class is going to be treated as a bean, and Spring Container will manage it. What I meant by manage, it means from object instantiation to its destruction, Spring Container will take care of it. So basically, in simple words, manages the life cycle of bean class, or a simple class of Java class. So bean, let's remove that Java class. So that's what Spring Container do. For what? If you mark any class with @bean annotation. And when we say life cycle, okay, there's a typo. So we have lots of steps in that life cycle. Let me show you life cycle of feed class. Again, it's a part of Spring core. So I don't want to go into that much detail. It will confuse you, but I'll definitely show you that. Oh, my bad. Let me show you the images again. So just 7 steps. Right. Bean class Spring. Yeah, that was a wrong keyword. And if you see this image, you can see these much are the steps for any bean class. So it's a completely different domain. If you create any bean class, you can see these much steps it has to go through. Constructor, setters, bean name aware, then bean class loader aware, the bean factory aware, then bean post processor, then post construct. Then after, before constructing, it will do certain steps like initializing bean, then init, then whatever it's done here, post process, it will do after initialization. That was before initialization, it is after. Then finalize, destroy method, like we have init method, so destroy method, and so after that, it calls disposable bean, like we have initializing bean, so we have disposable bean. It has a post is construct, it is pre-destroy, and finally IOC container about to remove that bean, and then bean is performing task, and then done. So all these are going to be, I read it in a different way, but yeah, it goes like from here to it ends and finalize. So whatever is done here, it kind of do the closing part. If you remember in servlet we did one thing, init service destroy. So that was only 3 step life cycle. Here we have, I haven't counted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So almost 15 steps are there just for one Java class, which is known as bean class. That's why Spring is so powerful. It has a very fine grained control over a bean. If you have 100 beans, that means all 100 bean class will go through all these phases. So developer has a better control over the class. They can switch or they can do a change at any flow. So that's how it looks. Again, if you're not getting it, don't worry. Not required, at least in development purpose. Nobody's going to ask you, but yeah, you should know that there are certain bean life cycle, and bean is nothing but just a Java class, a special class which is annotated with at the rate bean annotation, or just at bean annotation. So I know I said it's a 2 minute topic, but I think I should consider that. So I took some time. Okay, so that's about bean. Now let's get back to the Spring Boot. So now we have a project ready, and that's how it looks. And even yesterday we tried, I mean in previous class we tried to execute our application. So right click, run as application. Let's do this again. So if we execute, we can see on the Eclipse console it says Tomcat started port 8080. So something happened, a server got started and it is running on port 8080, and it clearly said that it is running, it is started actually. So if we run or write this port, let's try to do this. Localhost colon 8080, execute, and it says white label error message. Something's not there, but yeah, request is gone through the server. Server responds this. It says it cannot find the default request. Fine. Okay, we'll see that in a minute. Before that, we have to understand how to create request or how to create endpoints, right? So the simplest one is get request. Let's see that first. So here we are trying to understand how to create that get REST API. Okay. So third image. So get is all about fetch data, right? Fetch data from server. This is what it do. But for now, we will use it just for simple purpose. I just want to print something. So when I create an endpoint, I want something to be printed on our Eclipse console. Simple. Let's start. Let's do it in baby steps. So going back to project, if we are, so let's close form file. We don't need it. We just have to make sure it has a web dependency. Only then your application can trigger a API call. Okay, so we are done with that. Fine. So what I'll do, I'll create one endpoint right here in the main method. Okay, I mean where we have a main method. So let's public void get API call. Done. Here I'll say sysout get API call method is called. So ideally when we are working in Java application, usually what we do, we create an instance of class, then call the method, and that's how typically we can call a method. But now we are in a Spring Boot application, so we have to call this in a Spring Boot way on web page at least. So this is just a regular method. Let's make it special by using at. It's a method. Don't treat it as a class. Okay. So it's a method, and if you have to create a get request, make sure that you are writing get mapping. Okay. And if you expand this line 3, you can see one annotation came up. Sorry, yeah, one import came up for this annotation, that is get mapping from Spring Framework .web .bind .annotation. Fine. It's from Spring Framework. It's not a part of Spring Boot. Spring Boot is just using it. It's a part of Spring Framework. Fine. This is clear. Now, how do I know when to call this? Because we don't have any object instance, object reference or something to call that method name. So we have to create its identity, a unique identity. So whenever I call it, it should get called and it should print this message on our console. So how to generate that unique identity or URL? Just put brackets, then slash, and I'll say get first call. Okay, that's my endpoint name. Again, not ideal, but for first class, it's fine. Okay, so our endpoint is ready. Let's stop the service because we have done change in Java class. So better stop the service and run again. We are actually stopping the server. Service I'm calling it, but it's actually a server. Okay, and if I run the server, it give error because it's a main method. So run as application going executing, and again it's up. Docker started. Let's go to web, and how to request it, just put a slash and whatever we wrote here, copy it, paste it, and enter. Oh, again it's saying 404, nothing happened. So how does Spring Boot knows that you have a endpoint in your Java class, right? It doesn't knows. It just inside inside a class. So to let the Spring Boot know that I have endpoints in certain class, you have to write one more annotation at top of the class. So Spring Boot will take care of that class and scan it for any possible REST API. So get is one of the REST API present here, but it doesn't know. It means Spring Boot doesn't know it. So we have to write at REST controller. Okay, fine. From where it is coming? Again from Spring Framework. Spring Boot is just giving you architecture. Everything is coming from Spring Framework. Cool. Let's stop the service again because we added a new annotation. REST controller. Let's see, will this work? Run as application. Okay, no compilation issue. It is now. Everything looks fine. Let's go to web and request it. Oh, this time something happened. Looks like something happened. I think we saw this kind of image in servlet class as well. When request was successful, screen goes white because we are not printing anything on web page. So let's check the console. And if I scroll left side, yep, I can see my first API is called. So what we did, let's analyze it. So to get this API, to get this get API call, we have did two things. Oh, it is highlighted. Set, copy again. So we did two things. First, at class level, we have added one annotation, REST controller. And second thing we did, we have created a method and marked it with annotation, get mapping. Okay. So this is the annotation and this is the whole method. And when you execute, because we are printing on sysout, so that's how it comes up on your console. Okay, cool. It is working great. So at least we are able to call an API. And it's great. We just learned our first API call. Fine. It is good. Now it's an REST API. Don't expect you will get a UI on your web page. Okay, don't expect it because APIs are supposed to be called from different developer or different code. This is not for human consumption. Human means the us, the normal human beings. Even for us, we cannot expect anything on UI when we are just writing an API and say, okay, if I call something like this, so I should get some message on web page. No, don't expect that. That's a part of you front end. We are not writing any front end code. Forget about whatever we did so far. Everything we will deal either it goes on console or the tool we are going to use, that is Postman. So this was get request, and get request can be called on browsers. Okay, let me write it here as well in a note. Get request can be called on web browser. Get and delete as well. Also typically is better. Okay, there are multiple ifs and but that's the standard. At least if you're writing any REST API, so typically you will see that get and delete can be called through browsers, and we will see why and why other requests can't be called like post and put. Okay, we'll see that maybe not sure today or maybe tomorrow class. Okay, but first API call is done. Let's move to next part. This is good, but problem is why we are writing everything in this class, which is supposed to just trigger a whole application. This is not ideal, right? Not ideal coding. Put everything in the same file where we have endpoint. This is mixed up because this class is all about Spring Boot application or Spring Boot application notation, which loads your server and everything is done. So better not to write anything here except some configuration which we might do later. But for now, we should fetch this code or put it somewhere. Somewhere means in a different package. Different package is best for this, and this is all about controller. You can see even the class says, sorry, the annotation says controller. So I'll do one thing, guys. Notice here the root package name is com.cloudraga. That's my root package name. So if I have to create a separate package, a new package, there should be its roots in its root, and you can create something inside it. So I'll right click on it, package, and then I'll say control. Oops, controller. So now notice the name. Let me refresh. Oh, okay. So this is here, and I'll create a different class, new Java class in that new package. Uh, let's say first controller. Done. So we already know if you have to create any controller, this annotation should be here. So I'll cut this code or the annotation and paste at the top, and then I'll do the same here with a method. It goes here and then paste it. Fine. So what we just did, we just extracted that code from the main method or main class. We call this main class, by the way, main class, and then put it here. Okay, and let's verify. Service should be, just a second, guys. So we have a console here. Let's run this application again. Right click, run as application. Server is up, and if I call this again, 1 2 3 4 5. So I called this API 5 times, and if I scroll left side, 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, so everything is working fine, and we have segregated our code or the controller code outside or the API call outside. Can we have other endpoints as well? Yes, you can have. So I'll just copy it and I'll call this, let's say, user. I'm calling it user this time. I'll say get user. As of now, we don't have any database connection or any service layer, so I will hard code things. So be with me, bear with me. Maybe tomorrow we'll try to connect with database if everything was fine as expected. Okay, so I'll say this and I'll say for now again printing a message, user API call. Let's do this quickly because it's the same stuff, nothing special. So let's stop it and terminate. So my new request is user. So right click, run as the application. Application is up. Let's go back and try to change this endpoint with say user. And if I request, again screen is blank. And if I scroll left, user API call. Great. Okay, but this time I want something in object form, or at least I want something in a string. I want to return something, right? So we already done this out. I'll keep it that way, but now I will return something. Let's say string, and then I'll say return user is fetched, or user data is shown. Yes, fine. So see, this time I changed the method or return type. It was void. Now I'm making it string type, and I'm even returning the string. User data is shown here. Let's suppose we have a UI which shows the user data. So okay, this is done. Let's start the service again and run this again. So now this time we are returning a data or a return type. Okay, it's up. Let's go back on the browser and execute. And here we are. So now we can see some data as well. User data is shown here, but this is not a typical response. It's a REST API response, which in string format. But yeah, it is working fine. I'll just fine. Let's create some more endpoints. One more, one more. Let's stop the service. So we are able to print string. What if I want to return, um, let's say object, user object, right? We can expect API is returning user object. So how to do that? Let's see. Third one which says we don't have any class yet. So let's create it here. Yes, you can create multiple classes. So here create a class user and put two fields, private, um, let's say ID and name. So private ID, int ID, private string name. It's a Pojo class, simple Pojo class, nothing special. No entity, no bean class, just a Pojo class. Generate getter setters, select all, generate. And what is that? Remove. It goes here. So I just created a user class inside it. It's fine. Or okay, let's do one thing. Why we are messing with the code? Let's create a separate package. I'll call this What should I call this? View class, okay? Value object or view object. I'm calling it VO. And inside this package, again, you can see it is inside com.cloudtracker. Root should not get changed. If you change the root, your code will not work properly. So a class user done, and I'll cut this out from here. So I created a separate class. If there's a confusion, let me know. I'm just creating a separate class. That's it. Nothing special I'm doing here. There should be no confusion. If there is, let me know. Like, why are you creating it? I want return object. We don't have it yet. I want to return it. So user, and I'll say method name get user object, and I'll change the endpoint as well user object. And let's comment this first time. We'll do that, and now it complained that you are expecting return. So let's say new user. Right now I'm not setting any field, just blank object. Okay, it's done. Let's stop the service. Let's see how it looks like. Oh, we have an error. What is that? Where is that error? There it is. New user is not imported, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Now let's run the code. Have a look. It looks like it is inside of there. So just refresh the project and it will go away. Okay, there it is now. Okay, right click, run as application. So we are about to see how it will get interpreted by Spring Boot. So I'm returning. This time I'll request user object on the browser and see how it looks like. You can even show it in a JSON format. That's why we understood why or how JSON looks like. So if I click on pretty print, it will give a JSON structure. This is. And if you actually understood how JSON looks like and how it converts, you can easily understand the fields of a user class. ID name become its keys, and these are default values. Default value of int is 0, default value of string is null. So that's what it looks like when you request something like this. Okay, cool. What if I want a data as well, right? Because we are getting default value. What if I want a data as well? So let's do that as well. So on comment, I'll say user object with data. Again, this is not an ideal way to create any endpoint name. I'm just giving some name to you guys can easily connect with it. Later we will also understand what is the best way to create endpoints. Best practices, I want to say. Get user object with data. Okay. So this is going to be user object for sure. There it is. Now I won't return a blank object. I will first of all create object and then I'll return it. So it goes like user, user, new user, then user dot set. I'll use setters. So ID 1, user dot set name. Let's say Ram, and say return user. Okay, code format. Everything looks fine to me. Let's hit this endpoint. I'll copy this. Not in, actually, we need to run the application first. Run as application. Okay, service is up. Let's change this, paste it, and hit the request. Yes, I can see my data is also coming. Nice. So I can verify my object is easily converted by Spring Boot. And you guys can see we haven't written any logic or code here. By default, Spring has a converter written. It's all about Spring Boot now. Now Spring Boot is taking care of it and convert that data. What we are sending here, the user object, how it interprets in a JSON format. So we requested something. We haven't tell that okay, hey, Spring Boot give me this user object. But Spring Boot knows that it has a default mechanism when it says whenever it sees a Java object, it by default converts into a JSON format. And obviously you can always change the response type, but by default it is JSON always. Okay, so that's how it looks. Just give me a moment. Let me put all these things on Paint so you guys can easily connect. So initially the endpoint was, let me Just if can I let me try if I can put all these in the same page this way, so I can also print the responses. Okay, so first one was get first call. So it was again from the it goes in a console, nothing special. Screen goes blank, and this is how it looks like. User API called from it is coming. Oh, it's a previous request. Just a second, let me clear this. Okay, request again. Get API is called. Okay, there it is. Next we called user object. Fine, just user. So it prints everything on web page. Everything means the string. Okay, cool. It is working. Then we requested that give me user object. So user object is here. Copied. User object. Entered. And it gives us a JSON format. But again, since we haven't initialized the field, so it gives us a default values of the fields of a class. Let's move a little bit up. You also go up. You also go up. Okay, and finally we decided to give details as well, the data. User object with data. Not a ideal name for any REST point, but that's fine. For first day, it's good. And that's how we get response. So we get data of user object. Fine. This is fourth image. So this is from here. Let me give a lines. Called this called this here, and this finally calls here. Okay, so now we have an idea how string or object can be transformed. Can we call this? Okay, let's do one thing. Let's see how it gives a collection object, right? But again, I'll suggest try this by yourself. Object data, just collection. Okay, just a collection. Get collection. Get collection, and here the type would be, let's say, list of string. I want to return a list of string. So that's fine. We can do that. Let's create a collection. List of strings, or let's say books, array list, and then I'll start with books dot add, let's say Java semicolon, let's say Angular, Spring, JS, and once it's done, let's return books. Okay, so one more endpoint is ready. Let's stop the service, right click, run as application again, and this time request collection. So you can see how it means Spring Boot treats it. Yep, so it's a collection, so it shows in a square bracket. So just again play along and see some multiple types and figure out how Spring behaves differently. I'll do one thing. Have this image. Let me extend a little bit this way. Oh. Okay, and I'll paste it here. Not this way. Let's have the whole. Okay, and this is how it gets printed. Okay, so whatever we discussed about JSON, I tried my best to make it simple as possible, so you guys can connect it how Spring Boot converts it, and that's why we did that exercise in previous class to understand how things gets converted from one end to another end. Okay, great. So we have seen how it works. Now, can we call these APIs from Postman? Yes, so let's see the Postman. So that's a logo, a man, flying man in orange color. Okay, so if you have this Postman, I'll suggest always sign in. I have multiple accounts, that's why there were multiple conflicts happening, so I just logged out from all. So you can always sign in. So everything, whatever you practice here, it will remain till your account. So I prefer you use Gmail accounts, Google accounts, and whatever API you request, you call from here, it will remain till your account is there. The account, Google account or whatever account you use. But again, Gmail is fine. Fine. So how to call it? How to call any endpoint? So we are going to learn how Postman works. So we just have one on right now. We just know how to request, get APIs. So I just copied this. So go back to Postman. We have a plus icon. Click on this plus, and you can see we have a get. And as we know, there are multiple HTTP verbs out there. And if I click on this drop down, I can see list of it. Get, post, put, delete. And I told you there are like other 7 or 8 requests are there. Patch, head, options. There's one more. I think they have removed it. So, but yeah, our critical CRUD operations are here already here. Get, post, put, and delete. So as of now, we just know how to request get. This is the endpoint HTTP colon something something, and then this is my endpoint. Get first call. Okay. So whatever you do, click plus icon. Make sure that you are on get request, and paste your URL here. And click send button. That's it. And there we are. Since we are not printing anything on here, it gets printed on console. Get API is called. Okay, fine. Next one, user. I copied it. Just remove that get first call and paste here. And then click send button. And now I can see data is here. User data is shown here. Cool. So we are returning as a string. Got it. Next request, user object. Okay, so it should show something in object format. Okay, so user object. Paste it, request send, and here we go. You guys can see it is coming that way. Maybe you will get this way raw, so make sure that you switch to pretty like we did in Chrome. Pretty means like just giving a better view to your response. So pretty is like this way, so it gives you a proper JSON format structure. It's empty, that means we don't have any data yet. So let's say user object with data, copy it, remove this, paste it, and say send. Yes, now we have a data here as well. For collection, copy it, remove, paste, and say send. Here we are. So we can see it's a square format, square brackets. For object, it's curly brace. For objects, it's curly brace. For collection, it's square bracket. Collection always referred in square brackets. Okay, this is done. So we have now have a clear understanding how you can get request or get APIs. Fine. What about post? So post has a different scenario, but we will discuss about when we actually do some CRUD operations or database operation basically. Before that, I want to discuss some other things. There are some other things you can uh, other ways to request. Let's save this first. Fifth image. So in previous class, we also some different ways of APIs. There it is. So slash weather slash location ID, and this is how it get passed slash weather slash one, and response gives something. Fine. So can we give ID as well? How to give that ID? That's the question. And this is kind of again normal thing in REST APIs that you are passing some parameters or variables in your request. Okay, I used some technical terms, parameters or path variables in your get request. So how it works, how it looks like, let's see. So we have two things here when we have to pass a variable in your URL. So question is how to pass um, parameters basically. Params are variables in in request URL. Okay, that's the question. So the answer is first is by using path variable. Next is same by using query parameter. Okay, so these are two ways to pass something in your variable. So let's see how to use path variable. So let's do this right here because it's all about get. Get is one of the simplest requests, so I'm playing with that only. Let's copy string. Okay, so I'll say user. Now notice how to do that. Okay, let me do this here first. So when we are using path variable, how it looks like slash. Let me copy this entire URL from here. Let's say user. So it looks like this. So we call this path variable. Just variable is passed in your URL. Okay, so that's the example for it. How to do it? We have annotation at path variable. So use this variable and you can easily fetch that data. So let's try this out. So going back to the code, here what you have to do, whatever value or whatever variable you're going to use, put that in curly brace. Guys, focus here, okay? If you have a dynamic variable which is going to pass here, use it here and then type whatever the variable name. So I'm going to call it ID. Once it's done, uh, let's call this get user by ID. Once it's done, you have to use this parameter, annotation here at, use that annotation as a parameter. Path variable int and make sure that the name you're using here, it should be same. ID case should be same and there should be no typing mistake or there should be no difference in the spelling. If I have something like this, so I have to make sure that this goes as it is here. Okay, this is the case. So make your variable name meaningful so you never get confused at what I just passed in my request. So if it is ID, it goes in a curly brace and it should be marked with at path variable int ID. It's done and let's make it simple. I just want to print it. Whatever I'm passing, it should get print. So okay, if it should get print, we already know how to print on response. So I can say int return ID. That's it. So whatever I pass in parameter, it should get print on the response. Okay, what is the response? Let's see this again on Postman. Application executed. Give me a minute, guys. Yeah, so application is up. Let's check the browser. The Postman this time. So my request says user. There it is. So this is the endpoint 8080 slash user and plus I want to pass something, any dynamic thing. Let's pass 100. Okay, hit the send button, make sure that it's a get request, send button, and yes, I'm getting 100. So guys, the top section from here till here, this section, we call this in Postman, it's a request type or request area. This section, just follow along my mouse cursor. This is REST request or REST URL area. Request, yeah. And this is REST response, this section, which has body, cookies, headers, test result. Same thing is here, parameters, authorization, headers, body. Everything is all about request. This section is all about request. This section is all about response. So, and response says 200, okay. I told you that go through the HTTP error codes. So this is one of the code 200 and this request is processed within 98 milliseconds. If you just hover the mouse, you can see lots of other details. Socket initialization, DNS lookup, TCP handshake, all the time sums up, and that becomes your total time of your API request. The the heavier API is, the more time it takes. Fine, but we can see data is changing. Let's change it to 999. Request sent, and yes, I'm getting a response. All because I'm returning whatever coming in the argument. So that's how you can pass path variables in your request. Likewise, you can also try query parameters. So that's your first request, first homework. Try this in your homework. This means the query parameter. Quite simple, nothing special. If you understood so far, you can easily try query parameter. Just annotation get changed and it deals in key value base. Okay, it goes in key and value. Okay. Okay, so let's take a call. There it is, and we request it like this. Okay, let me take this much from here. This is send button, and when you request it, this is what we get. Copy this section. We get the response 999, and as well the status code and time and everything about response. So this is all about response. Okay, nice. So this is in capitals request. This is all about response. Okay, so that's how Postman works. So as per requirement, you can change the request types and things will work out. And this is homework. Okay, so try this out how query parameter works. I'll just give you an idea. It is a key value, and definitely there's an annotation as well. So check that out. What's the annotation? Okay, and what else? What else we can do? Okay, so now we are left with delete, post, and update. So we saw get mapping. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's create a simple Java class, one more class, like it's a first controller. I'll say new Java class. I'll call this CRUD controller. You guys can see I'm just following up some uh, conventions of Spring application. If you are working with this, so the class which has endpoints, it should be end with controller. That's again some kind of convention, and as a developer, as a Java developer, you should respect it and accordingly name it. Don't just call it any random name. It should end with controller. That's it. Full stop. And if still you're doing it, that means you don't know the basics of API creation. Okay, so we have this class controller. Let me create four different methods for different APIs. Here I just want to show you how to call these APIs. So first method, public. I'll make it simple. Tomorrow we will do some more changes. So it's get. Method name is get. And here I'll say uh, get mapping. It will say get. I'm just everything writing I'm get and sys out. I'll copy it. Like get we have delete. Delete is again one of the simplest endpoint. You don't have to do much there. Delete. Okay, I forgot to print something. Get called. It's called delete called. Okay, and delete action is not imported. Done. Okay. After delete, the most complex request is post for beginners. So for now, that's how we write it. Post mapping, import it, done. It will be again not a best way to write any API name, but forget it. We don't want to do everything on first day. So it's post called, and then finally delete. Put mapping, put put put. Okay, fine. Everything looks fine. So just a very basic implementation of any API you can see so far. Okay, let's right click, run as application. Application is up, so it's get, post, put, delete. Fine. So copy this endpoint, everything is same. Get requested, it's blank. That means it's on console. Get called. Okay. Copy, delete. Request sent. You can see I'm getting error. What it says, method not allowed. So you have a delete, so make sure that you have to switch to delete. Request sent. Okay, empty. Good. And I can see delete is called. Nice. Next, let's say post. I'll request again with delete on left side. Gives me error. Let's make it post. It simply says method not allowed. With post, it should be post. Request send. And yeah, no error. It says post called. Next is put. So change it to put. And request send. And yeah, everything is working fine. And put has been called. Okay, cool. Can I change the name or just keep it same like we have here? I mean, let me duplicate it, comment it, and I'll make it blank. Let's see what happens if I don't write anything. Just keep it slash or blank. Okay. Not here. This goes comment. There goes this. Okay. So you guys can see we have not given anything. Just blank, blank, blank. Everything is blank. Fine. Let's see what happens. So let's stop the service again. Okay. Going to run this code again. Run as application. No error on console, so it looks fine. Going to web page. If I hit this time put request, it will complain that this is not found. Yep, there is no put request. Everything is slash here, blank. So let's hit it and clear the console. Clear console basically. Here we are, and with put request I requested. Okay, no error here, and I can see put called. Nice. Let's make it delete default request sent. Oh, delete called. Nice. Um, put blank again, just no endpoint name requested. Put is also called. That means get will also get called. Requested and get called. So you guys can see even if you have properly configured your annotations. I'm talking about annotations. Get, post, put, delete. Even you don't have to give the unique names. Spring Boot can easily identify your REST endpoints just by these. So in a simplest way, you can keep you can just remove all those endpoints at least for beginning for first class or maybe for second class, and still your endpoints will work. You don't have to pass anything extra on your URL. Spring Boot is smart enough to recognize the type you're passing. Get, post, put, delete, and endpoints can be called. So you don't have to pass anything on your Unix side. Issue was when I was on first controller. Check out. I cannot do it here because all requests are of get type. So here Spring Boot get confused. If I keep it to annotation of same type, this way and this way. Now it get confused. It says, okay, get request, no URL. Get request, again no URL. So it will give you a warning when you are running application that you have ambiguous mappings. I'm not sure what's the exception. Let's check out. So I'm keeping a slash here and keeping slash here as well. So two slashes with get request. Let's stop the service, remove and run the application again. Application gets called, and what it says, there is a already been method, okay, caused by yeah, there it is, ambiguous mapping, cannot map first controller method. Which method? This method. So this is already mapped somewhere else, so that's where it get confused. So if you have unique endpoints in your class, just for annotation, no duplicacy, so you can even keep those unique names outside. Just a convention Spring Boot follows, and if you understand this convention, you can easily use it without writing extra codes. So this is the whole idea to demonstrate how it works properly. Okay, so tomorrow what we will do, we will enhance these endpoints and we will actually see the difference between get and post, because as of now everything looks same. So why to have these two different types of or four types of annotations? So we will see that part, or maybe if time permits, I think it will be, because that will be done within next 15-20 minutes after the class. So we can do some CUD operations as well. But yeah, for today's class, I think it's more than enough for you guys. So go back, study all these endpoints, and when we meet tomorrow, so you guys have an idea how Spring Boot API works.